Daryl Recommends Podcast is a podcast recommending series and shouldn't be mistaken as a reviewing one. Opinions about each show are my own and should not reflect what each podcast has to offer. Content warnings aside, I believe if any recommendation in my series interests you, you should give it a chance, regardless of how I personally feel about the show.
The following audio recording is classified documentation for case with the enclosure. Unauthorized access to this information will lead to immediate intervention. Progress further if proper clearance has been given.
Dr. Damon has suggested that I start an audio journal of some kind. Something outside of my therapy sessions to help me track my progress or whatever. Considering I don't have much of anything that's mine anymore, she suggested that this might actually be a good way to reclaim some of my individuality? Maybe talking about what I do know of myself might help me remember more. So I guess I'll start with what I know. My name is Dr. Jared Hell. I'm a field researcher for the enclosure. I specialize in studying the
After a freak lab accident, Jared Hell can't die. With no memories of his past, we follow Jared's work for the mysterious enclosure and their interactions with the small town of Witchton. Rebuke is a queer horror podcast that dwells into folklore, neurodivergence, identity, and community. It's set up like a found footage show where we listen to Jared's accounts through audio logs, and is a fictional story based off Midwest folklore. I like Rebuke a lot. I think it's really great. It's definitely not a super long story, so if you're looking for something that's short and easy to catch up with, then I definitely recommend this story as something for somebody who wants to put their feet into more, I would say, fictional narrative-based shows rather than something that might be an anthology podcast, and I'm talking about horror genre, but this could also be for any show. Rebuke definitely is something that I would recommend to somebody who wants to get into a more narrative-based, mystery-esque podcast. And I like the mystery that the show does. The mystery for Rebuke is really good. I'm not going to dwell too much into it because I think it's something that it builds up to very good on its own. And the direction that it's going into is very interesting, especially since we're midway through season 2 and we're finally putting pieces of different clues together. And actually one of the reasons why I wanted to get to doing this podcast recommendation now is because they had recently announced that they are returning to do the rest of season 2 and continue on from there. So I'm very excited to see what season 2 has in store for us and where Jared Hell is going. I also love the monsters that show up in Rebuke and the character relationships that the show develops. And one of the more interesting aspects that the show does that I haven't really seen another podcast do, at least of the ones that I've listened to, I don't know if any of the ones I've bookmarked dwell into this, but the show takes a interesting look of humanizing a character who's neurodivergent, and it has characters, however, who dehumanize them for reasons that aren't because they are neurodivergent. And I find that really fascinating with how they go about, because a lot of it, especially since there are disabled characters in the show who do face ableism, it's a very interesting way to talk about how people talk in a ableist way or treat people with disabilities, whether they're physical disabilities or if they happen to be neurodivergent in some way, rather than associating horror with being disabled. And I like it a lot. I love how the show portrays that. And if you're and I know I focus a lot on queer representation, which this show does have a lot of queer representation. It's got non-binary characters and a gray ace protagonist who has a male love interest. And also our main protagonist is also neurodivergent. And like I said earlier, there's other disabled characters in the show. And I know I tend to focus more on just queer representation than any other representation, such as, if the show has a majority white cast or whatnot. But I think the show is very great in terms of diversity cast-wise and character written-wise and story-wise as well. Like I said, though, because there are topics of ableism that are discussed through it, it's I think the show does it very tastefully. So if you're somebody who is a bit concerned about that because I brought it up, don't worry. It's not offensive. The topic of death comes up a lot also in the show because Jared Hell can't die, but does not necessarily mean things can't kill him. So they die a lot. And also just the themes of medical malpractice and character death, hence the, Jared's little death problem. And I just really like it's such a nice show that you need, like, it gives me the kind of vibes of like a show that you listen to in the fall when you're trying to get like really into that spooky grove, and the mystery is just so well thought out. And it's kind of like, I don't see where the show is going, but I could also like get an idea of like the horrible ways that things that could happen to Jared, which makes me go like, that's gonna hurt my heart, but I'm intrigued. Because I like it when writers hurt my heart, as much as I curse at them for it. And Casper Oliver is just such a delight. Like, they're a good person. And it's just whenever, I love shows where both, like, the creators of the show, as well as just the show itself, is just delightful. And I feel like that's what Jar of Rebuke has a lot of. It's just the with my experiences with Thesperians Productions has been very, like, positive and very, I would say, more upbeat and very supportive in a way, if that makes sense. So anyway, now that I definitely am going to go ahead and I am going to link to their Patreon and website, either or. Sometimes I have these linked beforehand, sometimes I don't. Unfortunately, this is one of those times where I don't have their Patreon linked beforehand. But I do highly recommend checking the show out and trying to catch up before season 2 actually comes out. Or, well, season 2 is already out, but, like, the last half of season 2 comes out. They already have a trailer for the last half of season 2. And if you catch up to that trailer, it's like, ooh, now you can see the mystery in real time. And also just, the episodes aren't super long. They're like, I think like the longest one is maybe like almost 30 minutes, and like some of the shorter ones don't even get to 10 minutes. It's very easily a show you could catch up to in one day, or like a show you could take just a little bit at a time if binging through a podcast just isn't your thing. And like always, leave a suggestion for another podcast I should listen to, and I will also be linking my socials below, as always. So, goodbye. Have a good one. Check out Jar of Rebuke, and if you do, tell me you like it, because I want more people to like it as much as I do. Have a good one.